Welcome to the Finally Got Around to Podcast, the inaugural episode of this hopefully long-running series of podcasts. Today, just starting off with kind of talking about some of the biggest news stories within the indie space recently, and then I'm going to tail the end of the podcast with kind of the games you might have missed in this September, and then games to look forward to in this coming month, October. Planning to do another series of a kind of a partner podcast that's more about interesting topics, ideas, discussions, and stuff like that. But this one's going to focus mainly on things that are happening, games that are coming out, stuff like that. More like a news style podcast. So some of the biggest news stories from this September. First one I want to talk about is Annapurna Interactive. Now, if you haven't heard about this story, basically the entire Annapurna Interactive team resigned about mid-September. Kind of came as a surprise to most people. And that is a pretty shocking development. So I have this story here. This was broken by Jason Schreier at Bloomberg. The article, all of the links to this will, of course, be in the description. Annapurna video game team resigns, leaving partners scrambling. The entire staff of Annapurna Interactive, the video game publishing division of Megan Ellison's Annapurna Studio, resigned this month following a dispute with its owner. Annapurna Interactive President Nathan Gary and his team had been negotiating with Ellison, the daughter of billionaire Larry Ellison, to spin off the video game division as an independent entity. When Ellison pulled out of the negotiations, Gary and other executives resigned and were followed by around 24 other staffers. All 25 members of the Annapurna Interactive team collectively resigned, Gary and the group said in a joint statement. This was one of the hardest decisions we have ever had to make, and we did not take this action lightly. A spokesperson for Annapurna confirmed that it had explored a spin-off and said the parties failed to reach an agreement, which led to the resignations. Our top priority is continuing to support our developer and publishing partners during this transition, Ellison said on a statement to Bloomberg News. We're committed to not only our existing slate of games, but also expanding our presence in the interactive space as we continue to look for opportunities to take a more integrated approach to linear and interactive storytelling across film and TV, gaming, and theater. The exodus has led to chaos as game developers partnered with Annapurna try to figure out what this means for their upcoming projects. As a publisher, Annapurna is responsible for not only funding the games, but for handling services such as quality assurance, adapting the products for local markets, and marketing. Over the past few days, game makers working with Annapurna have scrambled to find new points of contact and figure out whether the company will continue to honor its agreements. The spokesperson said that all existing games and projects will remain under Annapurna. And then it goes into a little bit more, talking about things that have happened recently, and mentioning some of the games that Annapurna Interactive has worked on. But of course, link to that article will be in the description below if you want to read the whole thing yourself. I don't want to spend too much time reading it, even though I did read most of that article. So if you haven't heard of Annapurna Interactive before, it has long been one of the top 2 small publishers in the indie space. Normally when I think of the top 2 publishers in the indie space, I think of Devolver Digital and I think of Annapurna Interactive. I think between the 2 of those publishers, if I see that a game is being published by one of those 2 publishers, I'm usually like, oh, okay, like, let me take a look at this. Like, they have been consistently putting out impressive games, and I mean, particularly Annapurna has earned a lot of awards. So for example, of some of the games that have been published by Annapurna in the past, Stray, I think even was nominated for Game of the Year, or at least I certainly won Indie Game of the Year at the Game Awards the year it came out. Cocoon which was a huge indie game from last year that won a bunch of awards. I think maybe it won debut indie at the Game Awards. And then Outer Wilds, probably one of the most critically appraised indie games of the last 5 years, if it came out that recently. It might be a little bit later, but yeah, one of the most highly regarded of recent indie games. And that's just kind of the top level games that they've put out. So to have the entire staff of this publisher leave is pretty shocking. I understand that they definitely made the right decision based on negotiations falling through. But I do wonder where the future will go for Annapurna Interactive. They are continuing, they're bringing on new people to basically take on the lost positions. But are they ever going to have the same track record that they once had? It's kind of hard to imagine. Sure, they have people. Some of the people are at the top of the ladder are still around, but it's usually the people doing the hard work on the ground, talking to developers directly, like working with them directly, that are going to have a major impact on certain games. So it's a big question mark for me. Big question mark. In terms of why this happened, there has been some interesting tidbits of stories recently about Annapurna. A former co-founder was recently rehired and was described as quiet hiring, where it kind of just happened suddenly, like they were suddenly back. There was a big announcement not too long ago that Annapurna Interactive would be partnering with Remedy Entertainment to bring the Control and Alan Wake franchises to film and TV, which is definitely exciting because those are really cool games, and Remedy is an excellent developer. So at the time, I was very excited to see where this would go. But now with this news, it is a little bit concerning. I don't know where Annapurna Interactive will be a year from now. Will the former employees of Annapurna Interactive, will they start their own small publisher? I think they have the experience, they have the team size. Do they have the funding? I don't know. Will some of the upcoming developers jump ship to go partner with these now independent? I don't know. There's so many questions, and I think this is kind of a news story that we're going to continue talking about for the foreseeable future unless absolutely nothing comes of it. I am definitely going to be keeping my eye on this over the next year just to see if anything pops up, any changes, any news. But in particular, I want to keep track of this story because Annapurna Interactive has some of the games that I'm most looking forward to on their upcoming games. So some of the games that I have been really looking forward to from Annapurna Interactive, thankfully kind of collected in a tweet by the Indie Informer, which is a great site that covers a lot of indie games and impressions and reviews, so I'd recommend checking that out. But of course, I'll link in that down below as well. The Lost Wild. Very, very excited about this game. It's kind of a exploration, like survival horror dinosaur game that looks beautiful from the trailers. And I'm really hoping that it kind of gives me this, dinosaur experience that I've been hankering for in video games from the start. The Morsels, recently announced at, I think it was an Indie World Showcase or something like that, kind of a disgusting, used in a loving way, roguelite game that has a lot of potential, and I've got it on my wish list. We Kill Monsters is one that I've been keeping track of for probably a year or more now. It has this very eerie atmosphere to it that's kind of all about like tracking down these giant monsters in an underground space, and I am very interested in it. I want to know more. There's really has not been a ton of information about it, no sign of a release date or window or anything yet, but this does really throw things for a loop. Ghost Bike, I'll mention too, is definitely something I've been looking forward to. The song that they used in their trailer for that game has been stuck in my head for so long. That is really, there's only one trailer for Ghost Bike so far, so I don't really have too much more to say about it, but it looks beautiful and it's like a bike racing game with an interesting story and premise. Lots of other games, Lush Foil Photography Sim, Bounty Star, games that I got to try at Summer Game Fest this year. To a T looks like a really cute game. There's a Blade Runner 2033 Labyrinth, which, I mean, Blade Runner is a pretty huge franchise. So what's going on there? Wander Stop was a very interesting trailer that was shown this year. I forget if it might have been at Summer Game Fest. Yeah, there's lots of stuff going on with these upcoming games. Lots of them that I've really been looking forward to. So this news is concerning. I hope that these developers of these very interesting looking games manage to find some way to continue the development and put these games out there. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. What are your thoughts on this story? Any games you've really been looking forward to? What are your favorite Annapurna Interactive games? Where do you hope to see this going in the near future? I think if I had total control over the world, I might say that it would be great to see this team form their own company and continue to do the great work that they've been doing. But I know that's a lot easier said than done. So I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed. Okay, we'll now move on to the next story I want to talk about. So another big news story, kind of in the indie space, but also a little bit in the AAA space, you might say. Nintendo is suing Palworld, or I should say Nintendo and the Pokémon company are suing the creator of Palworld, aka Pocketpair. In a statement they put out earlier this month, Nintendo, let me start that again. Nintendo, together with the Pokémon Company, filed a patent infringement lawsuit in the Tokyo District Court against Pocketpair on September 18, 2024. This lawsuit seeks an injunction against infringement and compensation for damages on the grounds that Palworld, a game developed and released by the defendant, infringes multiple patent rights. Nintendo will continue to take necessary actions against any infringement of its intellectual property rights, including the Nintendo brand itself, to protect the intellectual properties it has worked hard to establish over the years. I will link to this press release, I guess you might call it, in the description. If you want to read it for yourself, it's pretty short, not a lot of details, but it's definitely an interesting development. Palworld kind of took the world by storm when it came in early access on Steam and on Xbox Game Pass. I believe it was in January this year. One of the top selling games on Steam of this year, I think hitting almost, if not surpassing 20 million sales, which is kind of unheard of for, an indie game. There was definitely a lot of talk about how a lot of the designs of the PALs and some of the game mechanics are definitely similar to Pokemon, but the question was always, how similar is it? Is it similar enough? Does Nintendo have a case? And apparently they think they do. It took them, 8-9 months to, gather everything, get all their ducks in a row, or I should say ducklets in a row, and go for it. So for now, we're not totally sure on what the specific, what was the patent infringements that are under scrutiny here. Probably will be some time until this is truly sorted out. It might go to court, it might not, they might settle out of court, we might never know what the results of this are. I've heard that some of the patents include things like throwing a ball to catch a monster, which could have some interesting implications for other creature collector games. I don't want to shout out games that could potentially be in trouble for this. I don't want to give Nintendo a list of games that could be in danger, but yeah, this is a pretty interesting development. It's definitely going to have it's going to have a crazy impact one way or another. Either Nintendo wins this lawsuit, and that could have many different types of implications. Does that mean that Pocketpair needs to pay millions of dollars to Nintendo and the Pokemon Company? Does that mean that they need to shut down the servers for Palworld? They can no longer sell it. They can no longer host the game. Does that mean that they just need to change it from a ball to a box? Does that mean they need to remove a few of the PAL designs and replace them, or just remove them completely? Lots of questions here. And that's just if Nintendo wins. If Nintendo loses, now that's a whole other question. Does this mean that there's going to be a lot of other Pokemon-like games that feel a surge of confidence in terms of making their own game? I don't know. It does feel like that is the thing that could happen. People would jump on an opportunity like that. I have a lot of thoughts on this as well. I'm not a very big fan of Palworld just as a game. Doesn't have a lot of mechanics that interest me. I've played Pokemon a lot ever since I was a kid, and I have a lot of problems with modern Pokemon games and how the Pokemon Company runs things in general. So I don't particularly have a lot of love for either side of this. But I will say the Pokemon franchise is the highest grossing media franchise in existence, outdoing every other media franchise like Marvel, Star Wars, all kinds of other things like that. So even though Pocketpair had this huge success this year, 20 million copies sold or so, that dwindles in comparison to what the Pokemon Company makes, because Pokemon games like Scarlet and Violet, I believe, sold 25 million copies or so, and that's pretty normal for most Pokemon games. Pokemon games sell really well, but the majority of where the Pokemon Company gets its money is not from the games. It's from movies, it's from TV shows, it's from merchandise, all kinds of other stuff. I don't want to root for the Pokemon Company here, as much as I do think that there are some very similar designs in Palworld compared to some Pokemon designs. It's hard to root for the Goliath when it's up against the David. I think if there's some legitimacy to Pocketpair, stealing the work of developers, stealing artwork, things like that, it's definitely not okay. Definitely should be held accountable for that. But I really hope that this isn't the start of the Pokemon Company just trying to establish itself as the only creature collector that can be around, trying to copyright things like capturing creatures and stuff like that. I think that I really hope they don't overstep their bounds, because there's lots of really great creature collecting games, and I think most of them really do manage to distinguish themselves. I think Pocketpair definitely has some issues, but in terms of the gameplay, like, yeah, you throw a ball and catch a monster, but other than that, it's a very different experience. I guess that's also coming from someone who hasn't really played it that much. I haven't played it at all, but it's hard to be in this industry this year and not see a ton of footage of Palworld and hear lots of people talking about it. So take that with a grain of salt, I'll say. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on this topic and what you think could come of this, what you think will happen. Do you think Nintendo's gonna go for it? Do you think Pocketpair is gonna be the savior of indie games that they hope they will be? Yeah, lots of different ways that this could go. Be curious to hear your thoughts. And finally, let's just talk real quick about the games you might have missed this September. So lots of really great indie games came out this September, and here's some of the ones you might have missed. The Plucky Squire finally launched this September. Really fun, really great artwork, lots of really fun little puzzles and stuff like that. I'm only about an hour into the game so far, but having a great time and looking forward to exploring it more. Shogun Showdown has blown up a little bit on Steam. It's this turn-based card roguelike thing. I haven't actually played it yet, but it looks really cool. Wild Bastards, the kind of spiritual successor to Void Bastards, came out this month and looks really fun. Kind of building up a cast of bounty hunters and doing like a roguelike survival thing. I don't know. Survival is not the right word, but you know what I mean. Kind of escaping the law. Another game that came out this month is Caravan SandWitch, a open world exploration tied to a kind of van. It seems like a really fun world to explore, lots of great art and characters to interact with. So I'm looking forward to checking this one out. Selfloss, kind of an artistic, interesting looking game. I don't really know what to expect from it, but it looks beautiful and I'd be very curious to try it out. What the Car came out on Steam this month. Very funny, very ridiculous game that kind of a I've talked a little bit about this before, kind of a comedy game, which is a very interesting genre that has been I think been more in the zeitgeist this year, and I think that's kind of worth exploring. I Am Your Beast, very highly reviewed, looks like a really fun game, kind of boomer shooter-esque, with an interesting story, and it sounds like really great voice acting too. Fowl Damage, I'm a big fan of this game. It finally released this month. You play as a little egg and you try not to crack, but if you jump too high, well, that's the thing. No matter how high, if you jump, you always jump the same distance, and if you fall from that height, you break. So you need to be very precise in where you land. UFO 50 launched this month. 50 excellent modern retro games, if that makes sense. All developed by a fictional developer, and you kind of explore each one in chronological order. You don't necessarily need to do chronological order, but I've been getting into this one. I've probably played through the first 10 or so games so far, and a lot of them have been a lot of fun. And I'm someone who isn't particularly drawn to retro games, but it's a really fun one. Keylocker, a kind of cyberpunk rhythm turn-based RPG. It's pretty interesting, and I got to play a little bit of a demo at PAX West. Haven't played the full game yet, but it looks really fun, and I love the art style. Realm of Ink launched in early access this year. Another one that I haven't had the chance to try, but the art style kind of speaks for itself. It looks like a really fun game. Rogue Waters also launched just on the 30th of September. I got to play a good amount of this at PAX West, and it's a very fun pirate-themed roguelite tactical RPG that introduces a lot of unique mechanics to a kind of a tactical turn-based combat system. So I'm very curious to play more of this game. Now let's move on to what to look forward to in October. So if I haven't already given you a ton of games that came out this month to put on your wish list, here's some that are coming out in October. Kill Knight, a kind of action-heavy, I think it is very top-down shootery game, comes out on October 2nd. Pinball Spire, a pinball game that's kind of unusual, but you're kind of a little pinball exploring a underground labyrinth, I think. Kind of, you know, just like a pinball, but it kind of continues, and there's more exploration to it than just, you know, a regular pinball machine. Is the kind of thing you definitely need to see to understand. That also comes out on October 2nd. Run is a very interesting kind of simulation garden maintenance game, but it seems to have a kind of freaky horror element, and it's got a very interesting art style too. That releases on October 4th. Phoenix Springs, kind of a narrative point and click adventure puzzle kind of game. I got to play this for a little while at Summer Game Fest this year, and it has one of the most striking art styles that I've seen in really any game, and I think it's definitely worth checking out. Put it on your wish list. Shady Knight, a kind of almost has an I Am Your Beast look to it, but it seems like it's more about like using your grappling hook, kind of climbing up a tower. Very fast-paced action combo, high skill ceiling kind of game. It looks really fun. That comes out on the 9th. Let's see. Dice-O-Mancer comes out on October 10th. Looks like a really fun kind of card and dice turn-based battle game. I really like the look of this one, and I'm very curious to check it out. Neva comes out on October 15th. This is probably one of the bigger indie games coming out this month. Beautiful art style from the makers of Gris, G-R-I-S. Looks like it's going to really be a beautiful game, and I'm worried that it's going to make me cry. Streets of Rogue 2 launches on early access on October 22nd. Looks like a very chaotic, crazy game that's not very surprising. Fear the Spotlight comes out on October 22nd. This is exactly the kind of game to get if you want to play some spooky horror games this October. I didn't get to play it at Summer Game Fest, but it had a pretty big presence there, and a lot of people were talking about it. I think this is going to be a pretty significant little horror game. Wilmot Works It Out comes out on October 23rd. Definitely a very different game, very casual, cozy puzzle game. Don't expect anything too scary or challenging with this one. I think it's going to be a good one to take a break from the spookiness if you need that. And then one last thing I want to mention, doesn't have an exact release date yet, but Sulfur is scheduled to come out sometime this October in early access, and I have played a good amount of the demo and talked to the developers at PAX West, and it looks like a really fun first-person shooter roguelike game with a kind of very cartoony art style, but still manages to get very graphic and crazy, and looks like there's a lot of fun with this one. So definitely check that out. Hopefully they come out with a more specific date sometime soon. There are plenty of other games that I didn't get the chance to mention that are coming out. I'll put a longer list in the description if you want to check out the long list of games that I'm keeping an eye on. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. Hope you enjoyed this little podcast that I'm starting, and let me know what you think. What games are you looking forward to? What games did I miss in this September? Maybe I didn't even mention them. I'd love to hear about it because I'm always looking for the next cool indie game. But yeah, thanks for listening or watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.